Hey. Yeah, there was a podcast, and it's time for the newsy news. Hey everybody, my name is Onepeg. If you're new to this channel, I do stuff like this all the time, so maybe give me a sub or a like or a comment or something, if you feel like it. Otherwise don't, because you don't have to. But anyway, there was a podcast today featuring Nikita and a bunch of Tarkov emissaries, including Trent and DanExert and Sneaky Russian and Ironfists, and Nikita was also there. So they talked about a whole lot of stuff coming up with 12.12, and for those of you wondering if there's been a wipe announcement, no. Unfortunately, they didn't tell us if there's going to be a wipe or when it's going to be. But there was some other stuff, and it's cool, I guess. Okay, so I got a handy-dandy notepad here. I'm just going to go ripping down the notes that I've got, and there's a teaser image that I can show you guys, and we'll just run some gameplay B-roll footage or something in the background so that you guys have something to look at while you listen to my voice droning on and on about the game. First up, they talked about whether or not Tarkov was going to be featured in the Game Awards. Nikita said no. They have a patch to get out soon. They're not going to be doing anything for Game Awards or anything of the like. In fact, they also talked about, at some point, future lore publications for the game. There's nothing being planned in terms of movies or television series-style stuff on YouTube or books or any of that stuff regarding the lore because, again, they're focusing on trying to get the game to 1.0. So all of that, for now, is being put on hold. They have offers, but they're not doing anything with it. There were talks about different in-game dailies, weeklies, that kind of stuff. And they asked about the potential for having like legendary level missions that have a longer period of time to finish and a much bigger reward. Nikita fell back on the idea of having those global events or goal tasks for the player base, akin to things like Destiny or Elite Dangerous or any other like large community pooled goal kind of initiative stuff where when you get to a certain level goal, you get those rewards once the timer runs out. We've seen those before in other games, and something like Tarkov I think would be pretty cool. Nikita also talked about kind of putting factions against each other, so you'd have like USEC versus Bear and like a kill count thing just on like the most simplest level, and whoever got the most kills versus the other guys won. Now, there are way more USEC than there are Bear, so maybe that one wouldn't work out so great, but you know what I mean. Nikita used the keywords for 12.12 that they were working on something explosive and big for the end of the year as an end-of-year event. And he used the words explosive and big. Now, whether or not this is just a translation thing, I don't know. But we know that, for instance, Shoreline is connected to Lighthouse. And there's that large underground or under-mountain tunnel that runs along the shoreline of Shoreline into Lighthouse. We also know that that tunnel has caved in and is inaccessible, can't be traversed. So, if maybe for the New Year event, they blew a hole in that tunnel, and that was our big and explosive thing that kind of ushered us into the age of Lighthouse, I guess I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to the idea. He also said that they're going to have a holiday end-of-year stream for the community as like a New Year's special, probably somewhere during the week of Christmas and New Year's, maybe even on New Year's Eve. He also said that there's going to be a New Year's event on Twitch with drops from your favorite content creators, so make sure that you guys go watch Pestily and Landmark. Now, I will also be live then, I'm just saying, twitch.tv/onepeg if you guys are feeling frisky, but I digress. Then the big question, a wipe in 12.12 came up. Nikita basically asked Sneaky, why are you asking me this? And that question was skipped later on. Pestily ended up asking the question of when in chat on Sneaky Roo's channel, and Nikita said Wednesday as a joke. Nice, good one. Then moving on to the ballistic changes, the stuff that we've seen in those graphs that have been shown where the trajectory goes from red to green, which is a much larger gradient change versus the old line that was on the graph. For those of you that don't know, those graphs are representative of a more flatline trajectory, which is a good thing. It also is modifying how the damage and penetration and speed and energy of these rounds is falling off at a greater rate based on the distance traveled. Nikita confirmed that this is a damage and penetration drop over distance, along with speed, velocity, that kind of stuff. But he said that modernized barrels, longer barrels, stuff that gives you higher muzzle velocity will hold that damage and pen over distance a little bit better. So it could end up being something where we see people looking at muzzle velocity as a stat that they want to build into so that it maintains energy over longer traveled distances. I don't think that this is going to be something that will matter inside of, say, 75 meters for smaller arms, and probably won't be something that will matter inside of 200 meters for larger arms. But it's good to know that these are things that the testing brains like myself inside of Tarkov can go to a range and try to mess around with some friends and get an idea of what the fall off really looks like. Insofar as the statistics surrounding those different types of ammunition, he said that they don't have all of the info that they would like about certain levels of ammo, especially the stuff that is still considered military grade and still in service, depending on where that ammo is. So they've had to try to interpolate and guess those stats for certain ammo types that are still classified. His hope is that they make sense. It seems like they're really putting some work into this, so that's good. Nikita also wanted to decrease the auto recoil compensation in the game, but it turned out more difficult than they had hoped, this is new. This is not something that we have seen before. Historically, Nikita has always defended the auto recoil compensation system that is built into your PMC. The idea being that, yes, you hold the trigger down and at first the gun would jump, but your PMC knows what they're doing, quote unquote, and has the ability to better control that weapon because they have combat experience in handling these firearms. On the player base's side, it's always been criticized as being something that is too easy. So as gamers, most people want the ability to be able to control that themselves because that is something that helps you differentiate yourself amongst your peers as being more skillful. So what he wants to do, they haven't been able to modify this yet because it's turning out more difficult than they had originally hoped. It's a little bit more complex, I guess, in the code. But he said that they're going to make guns harder to control in the future and require more player input in order to control them. He also said that the recoil patterns of these guns are going to become more randomized as well. Then we went on to malfunctions and how this recoil system, along with malfunctions, is hopefully going to slow the player base down as the main idea. And he talked specifically about overheating and saying that this mechanic will cause major issues for people that are typically running through maps and holding full auto down mag after mag. As the weapon heats up, the more likely it is to fail. Nikita, in the past, talking to us about malfunctions, said that the gun is not going to malfunction above 90%, I guess now, durability. So 90 plus durability, the gun won't malfunction unless you overheat it. Once this mechanic is implemented, that ends up changing how the gun operates. And this is going to, my guess would be, drastically accelerate the degradation of the gun. And if you do overheat it, he said it's going to end up being like a major failure kind of thing. Now, whether or not that gun completely fails out and stops working altogether, I have no idea. My guess is that would be really bad in terms of how the player base would view it. But if it increases the likelihood that you end up having more malfunctions and it forces players to have to switch to different fire modes and use semi-auto a little bit more regularly, or better choose their targets instead of just engaging 5-mans in firefights and dumping 5 mags of ammunition into the ether, I guess we'll see. But the idea is that combined with this recoil system, Nikita hopes eventually it would slow the player base down so that they play a little bit more tactically and don't just run in guns blazing. Now, this moves on to another discussion where DanExert had talked about making a menu potentially inside of the inspection screen of a gun. Now, in here, you can see the KS-23, for instance. Different ammo, we all know, has different velocities. Base weapon systems like the MP7 or the MP9N, they have an ammunition type that the gun is calibrated toward, meaning that the optic on this, when it says 50 meters, it's designed for an ammo type that is, in this case, I think it's Action SX or FMJ SX. So the velocity of FMJ SX is set to a certain distance, certain speed. So a 50 meter zero is what this optic, and every optic that says 50 meters will be based on that FMJ round. In the case of the MP9N, it's PST or PSOGZH. I'd have to look it up. Every round that is fired out of this gun is zeroed based on that ammunition type. That's how it's always been. What Dan is suggesting is that instead, inside of here, somewhere in this menu that is listed on the inspection screen, you would have a drop down that would allow you to change whatever ammo type you're going to calibrate the gun for. So if on the MP7 you're using an AP round, or if on the MP9 you're using 7 and 31, which is significantly faster than something like PSO, the idea would be is that you could dial that gun in so that a 50 meter zero actually hits the point of aim at 50 meters instead of hitting high in the case of higher velocity ammunition than what the gun is zeroed for. Same obviously would be true for the slower stuff. Now, I will say that with the new ballistics changes that they're showing and how everything is traveling in a much more flatline trajectory, it doesn't rainbow as badly as it had been, especially in the case of the slower ammo. In those cases, you don't have to worry as much about the zeroing because it's all falling within a much smaller variation range than what it used to be. But still, being able to zero something or re-zero, calibrate it for the different round types without having to go into a lot of different extra coding. And this system already exists in the game, by the way, because if you put a shotgun round inside of a GL, for instance, before you go into a raid, that GL will be zeroed for the shotgun round. If you start the round with a grenade in the gun instead in the GL, when you go into the raid, it will be zeroed for that grenade. So this system already exists in the game. It's just only for the GL at the moment. With this drop-down system, that would end up changing and fixing a whole lot of problems. The conversation then switched to guidelines for VoIP. They were looking for information on whatever Nikita could tell them in terms of like what is considered abuse. So first up, if you're playing sound effects through VoIP, something like a grenade sound, the VoIP system is going to have a different EQing than what bullets sounds and grenade explosions and the PMC voice lines and stuff sound like versus somebody using the VoIP system. The EQing on that is going to be a little bit truncated. It's going to be more heavily like mid-range and more like loudspeaker-ish. Now, obviously, there's a lot that goes into that kind of stuff, but his point was that you would be able to tell the difference between somebody playing a sound effect or somebody trying to play a song over VoIP and an in-game sound effect. He also said that if you're going to do something like spam music excessively or excessive trolling, will end up getting you reported. My assumption is in this case that it's an auto-report feature. There's probably some kind of watchdog that sits there and says you've been talking this long or you have been using the button this much over this amount of time, and it will probably end up reporting you as a result automatically. It could potentially even turn you off so that you couldn't speak inside of the VoIP system in RAID for some amount of time, like a squelching feature, an automatic one. As always, the VoIP system in this game, they've already told us, is going to be something that you can opt into or opt out of. There's just going to be a checkbox that says VoIP on, VoIP off. I don't think there's, at the moment, going to be a way to turn off an individual person that you're hearing and just mute them. So it's kind of like an opt-all in or opt-all out, and then the system, I guess, is going to take care of it for them. Maybe. Now on to inertia. Nikita said the inertia feature needed to be done a long time ago. It's always hard to implement something new, but this is a basic mechanic that should have been in the game years ago. It's only controversial now because of what people got used to over time because the inertia system wasn't really in the game. There was a short amount of time where the inertia system was in the game and then they took it out because it was causing desync problems. But he did say that the inertia system in the game is not something drastic. But there are changes for players that are heavy and overweight, especially. So my guess is that you're going to see people like drifting a little bit more, maybe slower gun movement. The idea here is mainly at its core to decrease AD spam strafing. But when it goes live, he thinks that there could be things that end up getting changed, obviously, because it, again, is still considered a beta test. Trent ended up piping up and saying that he likes the stuff on the ETS so far, so there's that. As an extension of this, there was also a question about the fast weapon raising at the end of a sprint. When you sprint and you go to raise the weapon really quickly, there's like an accelerated rate that the weapon comes up to your shoulder. It's been a bug for a really long time. Nikita said that this is addressed. They're working on it actively now, trying to fix it. They said it's not completely done yet, but they're working on a change. However, now that they've implemented this inertia system, it has modified how fast that gun gets raised and has changed it, slowed it down a little bit. So we'll just have to see what that looks like. He also said there are more things coming in 12.12, but he doesn't want to say because surprises. Moving on to weapons, the Scar H and Scar L are confirmed. The revolver shotgun is confirmed, and we've seen screenshots of that already. The side-by-side double-barrel shotgun is also confirmed for this. He said that there's going to be different size barrels. My guess is different lengths, not different calibers. I can't imagine he's going to give us like a 20-gauge double barrel. And eventually, he said also the M249 PKP, maybe other LMGs are confirmed for the future. And then we have this teaser image, which was inside of one of the cliff houses. It appears on Lighthouse. And I'll just pull it up for you real quick here. So this obviously looks like a little bit of a Photoshop cover-up job. I love this image though, Nikita. This is fantastic. This looks great. That's amazing. It looks like we have a caricature of some of the devs. This is great. My guess is that this is covering up something that we would want to know or see. There's probably some image here that would be relatively helpful with something. I don't know what, but they're covering it up for a reason. But we can see here, obviously, we have the double barrel shotty. We have a nice fireplace sound system. This looks like it's inside of one of the cliff cottages on Lighthouse, obviously. Not a whole lot to discern from here. Looks like there's like a couple of server racks, so maybe this is like a new GPU spot. Might be worth checking for some tech in this case. Kind of cool. There were a couple other small questions, and then the podcast ended. The first one being, would there be a sawn-off shotgun in the pistol slot, or very small? Question was, there were just a couple of other questions that came, and then and then there was just one last question. Just as a side pot thing, somebody asked if there would be the ability to put a sawn-off shotgun in a pistol slot. And Nikita said, maybe, but no confirmation there. So that's everything. That's the entire podcast in a few minutes. So hope you guys enjoyed this one. Thank you guys so much for coming by. We continue to tickle the taint of 12.12. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.